Well, I guess you know that we are moving toward yet another debt ceiling crisis that has Washington in a tiz. Yeah, you've heard the same song before. About every 2 years, there's a new crisis over the debt ceiling. And we're told that if we don't act right now to borrow more money that we can't possibly pay back, then the world as we know it will come to a brutal and unmerciful end. Now, look, I'm not saying that default on our debt is a good thing. It's a horrible thing, and it could have a real impact on the entire global economy. But the United States has become like a hopeless drug addict who determines that the only way to deal with addiction is more drugs of a stiffer kind and a greater amount. I mean, at some point, there must be a reckoning with reality. Here is my simple understanding of economics, whether personal economics, business economics, or government economics. You cannot spend money you don't have, and you cannot borrow money you can't afford to pay back. That's it. That is the fundamental reality of economics. Now, most of us follow that personally, or we go bankrupt and we lose everything. Most businesses follow that, or they go out of business pretty quickly and painfully. The government? Nah. They just keep printing money and borrowing it. And the money they print becomes worth less, and the money that they borrow becomes so overwhelming that they can't even pay the interest on it, much less the actual debt itself. A drug addict or alcoholic will eventually die from the addiction or its side effects, or they will ultimately get into rehab and recovery. Our great nation needs to decide if it wants to commit economic suicide or finally come to terms with its out-of-control spending addiction. The debt of the U.S. hit its first trillion mark in 1982. Now, in fairness, it was under Ronald Reagan, who added large amounts of federal spending to help get the country out of a recession. It would be 2008 before the debt climbed to over 10 trillion. The current debt is $31.5 trillion. Or as Joe Biden would say, $31.5 trillion. That's what he would do. Now, if this debt ceiling crisis was so urgent, why did President Biden refuse to even meet with House Speaker McCarthy for 100 days? Not even a meeting. And throughout the 100 days, the president made it very clear there would be no negotiating. Throughout what seemed like his eternal Senate career, he made grand speeches on why we had to negotiate through each debt ceiling debate. But as president, it's his way or the highway. The House Republicans did something that neither the White House nor the Senate did. They actually put forth a very specific proposal, and they passed it through the House. The Senate did nothing, nada. And the White House, they trotted out the incompetent and incoherent Karine Jean-Pierre to say that if the Republican plan were accepted, ice wouldn't freeze, underwear wouldn't be washable, fleas would devour every dog and cat in America, and millions of Americans would be stranded in the deep forest having to eat tree bark just to survive. Well, she didn't say it just like that, but she all but cried that there would be massive, and then that favorite word of the Democrats, draconian cuts. Actually, even the Republican House plan would allow the debt ceiling to be raised, but the spending growth would be limited to 1%. Now, in Washington, when you get more money than you had, but it's not as much as you want, they call it a cut, okay? That'd be like me as a child getting an allowance of $0.25 a week and then getting bumped up to 50 cents. But because I asked for $1, it would be a 50% cut. That is just how insane Washington works. I am on the National Board for the Balanced Budget Amendment Committee, and I serve with several other former and current governors, senators, and congressmen. You see, by law, states are required to balance their budgets. We think that's a good idea for Uncle Sugar in Washington, too. And we propose an amendment to the U.S. Constitution that the federal government be required to do what you do in your household and in your business and what your state and local government does. Live with a balanced budget. Now, it makes fiscal sense but it will also end this every year or two drama of the sky falling because we have to increase how much we can borrow right now, even when the president is so worried about that he won't even meet with the Speaker of the House for over 100 days to even discuss it. Now, if a kid can't do his homework, what do? We hold him back a year. I think maybe we ought to tell Washington that if they can't live with a real budget, then we'll just stop paying them and send them back a year. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I hope you will now. The button is just below this video, and there's a little bell next to it. If you click on those, YouTube will reluctantly start letting you know when we've got a new video uploaded.